All right.
Most revolutionary comedic
So this is the
concept of our
stupidest thing we've ever thought of.
time. It's actually...
Yeah, we thought of a real idea. And the idea was, what if Mr. Softy, the guy who has a fleet of ice cream trucks in New York, what if he came out with a new track to play on his trucks and he debuted it at a Bushwick rave?
Again, I'd just like to know that this is what Naomi told us not to do. Right?
Okay, we have to stop.
Well, yeah,
We
all right.
just have to stop.
Okay,
This is all garbage.
We'll stop this absolute
We're so
travesty now.
fucking stupid.
Okay, some business. Want to talk business deals, guys?
Business
Yeah.
deals, okay.
Business deals.
Serious
All right.
face on.
Serious guys. Okay. You may have seen it on our last premium episode, but we're bumping it now again for all the free listeners, all the cheapskates out there. Chapo, the first official Chapo poster is now available. Poster by Twitter user Apocalypse. It is a poster that she did based on our original H.P. Lovecraft tabletop game theory episode, The Pizza in the Gate. It is available now. The link for that will be in the information for this show. You can check them out. They're available in 2 different sizes. Same excellent image. All official Chapo merch. Plug number 2, October. The City of Angels, Los Angeles. October 6th. October 6th.
We are at LA Podfest. It is a festival of pods, and we will be a part of that. And we're going to be there on 9 p.m. at the Biltmore Hotel.
Yeah, no, we're going to be in LA for that whole week. We're going to be there for a while, but we're doing Podfest that Friday.
We'll have other things on the schedule that we'll keep you abreast of. As
Keep your eyes open and your ears to the ground for Chapo Los Angeles tour. Like I said, if you're a fan in LA, we're going to be there very soon, but definitely Podfest.
Yeah, and you can get the tickets at lapodfest.com if you want to, or not. We're not your boss.
So yeah, now that we've gotten those 2 very shameless plugs for merchandise, products, and events that you can pay for related to Chapo Trap House, our brand. You know the brand already, the Reaper, baby.
Love this brand.
It's love that fucking Reaper.
You know what it is.
you already know. It's the Chapo, the Grey Wolves. It's us.
Brand is life.
Now on to our interview with Naomi Klein.
And so you guys haven't done the rest of the show yet. Are you gonna do that right after?
Well, me and Matt have a thing about Mr. Softy we're going to do, but we're going to save that for...
Yeah, we built a great comedy bit about Mr. Softy performing at a rave in Bushwick.
We listened to the Ted Cruz teaser on the way over.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's our genius friend.
But I had to turn it off because I felt embarrassed in front of the driver.
He truly was. I'm gonna have to give him an extra.
Yeah, we have that effect.
Oh, yeah.
So a number of people have talked about having to turn it down while listening in their cars because people were over looking at them while they were at stoplights or
Because
something.
the ideas are too smart.
Naomi, actually, I was sort of had this fantasy about you coming over here and coming into my apartment, and we're all dressed like Garth in that scene in Wayne's World about brands, where he's like, I just think it's a shame that everyone sells out and just does everything for money, but he's covered in just Nike logos from top to bottom.
That was your fantasy.
Yeah, that was.
My fantasy was I would come in and you guys would all bend the knee.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Well, I think we can make that happen.
I have bursitis. I can't do that.
Greetings, friends. It's your Chapo for this week. A little bit of show handiwork at the top of the show. We wanted Amber to be with us for this one. Unfortunately, she is still stuck on her way home from the Juggalo March. Her Amtrak was canceled, and she couldn't be here. But rest assured, Amber will be back with us in the middle of the week to give us a full dispatch on the Juggalos and everything else going on in D.C. this past weekend. Amber will be back shortly, but that almost doesn't matter because we've got a great guest this week.
You have another token woman.
Damn it, she's onto us.
Fuck. Naomi Klein. Naomi, hello.
Hey,
Thanks for joining us.
I'm glad to be here. I'm sad Amber's not here too.
Yeah, we all are, but I blame our horrible rail system in this country. Why
I
can't
blame
we-
Joe Biden personally.
Yeah, for screwing up all the juggalos screwed up the Amtrak this week. Now, you probably know Naomi is the author of books like No Logo and The Shock Doctrine, and her latest, No Is Not Enough, Resisting Trump's Shock Politics and Winning the World We Need. And I guess, Naomi, I want to start with, this is September, hurricane season. We're just coming off Harvey and Irma. I think Irma was the biggest hurricane on record yet in the Atlantic. Obviously, huge flooding devastation in Houston and elsewhere in the Gulf Coast. Florida got hit pretty hard. But I guess this provides a sort of a real-time example of the sort of mechanics of the shock doctrine and this sort of intersection of capitalism and ecological disaster that you've written so much about. And I guess I'm wondering if you've been following this and if you've seen any sort of real-time examples of the shock doctrine playing out in the response to these hurricanes, and especially not just the response, but also the aftermath in terms of rebuilding and, essentially what is going to get rebuilt and how it's going to get rebuilt.
Yeah. And as we're talking, and by the time this airs, we'll know a lot more what's going to happen. But as we're talking, there's another tropical storm that's now looking like it's going to turn into Hurricane Maria, and it looks like that some of the same areas that were hit by Irma are in the path. So it's been an incredibly intense season, and it isn't just the hurricanes; it's also the wildfires. Which are also still going on as we talk. It's not over. There have been a few, I've been following this phenomenon of, what I call the shock doctrine, more than a decade ago of harnessing the that sense of emergency, the fact that people are obviously focused on staying alive in these moments and picking up the pieces to ram through some of the most dangerous and pro-corporate policies in that window. And Katrina is the ultimate example of this. I've seen some really, pretty shocking examples. I was in Sri Lanka after the tsunami in 2005, which just wiped the coasts away. And one of the most egregious examples of the opportunism of using the fact that people are in that moment trying to save their neighbors' lives, trying to save their children's lives, that the government of Sri Lanka tried to push through a water privatization bill the day after the tsunami hit. So that, up till this point, was the most egregious example of the shock doctrine, but Trump outdid them. While Irma was nearing the coast of Florida, but before it made landfall, addressing his cabinet and proudly, releasing the tape where he told his cabinet that this means they need to speed up the tax cuts. Okay. I've seen a lot of politicians take advantage of shocks and disasters in the immediate aftermath. I've never seen a politician do it before it actually made landfall.
What was his reasoning? Why were the tax cuts so dire? Why was that such an emergency connected to the hurricane? Just why not?
He didn't explain.
Yeah.
I don't think it fit into a tweet. But I guess in the immediate aftermath of Katrina, there was an example of this where New Orleans was still partially underwater. There was this famous meeting at the Heritage Foundation 10 days after Katrina hit New Orleans. It was at Heritage, but it was the host was the Republican Study Group. And they came up with this document that was leaked to the Wall Street Journal, and I quoted it extensively in the Shock Doctrine, where they came up with 32 what they called free market solutions for Hurricane Katrina. And it started with privatizing the school system and, went on from there. But one of the items was create a tax-free free enterprise zone.
Well,
and the idea was, we want to spur Reconstruction. So how do we spur Reconstruction? We just, eliminate all regulation and taxation.
That's what they did in Baghdad, too, right? right?
They have one idea. Like, they literally have one idea. So that, I think if anyone had bothered to ask him, which so far as I could tell, no one did, like what the rationale of cutting taxes when you're about to get handed a $20 billion reconstruction bill is,
Right.
maybe he would have said that. I don't know, but no, I didn't see any explanation.
I mean, isn't that the old Salers saying, though? Like, if the tide is low, the deal is a go. If the hurricane you avoid, the deal is void. It's just old wisdom.
I'm
you know?
excited to see what Florida is going to look like under the new Disney management. That's going to be amazing.
They're just going to
a
expand
giant-
Celebration Florida for the entire thing.
Exactly. You're going to have to pay $200 at the state border just to go in to the state of Florida.
You need you exchange your
Yes,
U.S. currency
exactly.
for Florida bucks.
Yeah.
That's going to be sick. Yeah, I've got my PhD from Epcot.
Yeah.
Finally going to have my postdoctorate degree.
So,
Trump University.
yeah, Trump University.
Epcot.
Trump Epcot.
So that's one example. But there's some really scary stuff going on in Puerto Rico, right? Where there was already some pretty intense, example of the shock doctrine of using the economic crisis to ram through these policies. But now layered on top of that, the hurricane knocks out electricity, and this is now being used by the people who are already pushing to privatize Puerto Rico's electricity utility to go, look, it's broken, we need to privatize it. There was a really good investigation of that in The Intercept that folks can check out.
And the Puerto Rico thing is interesting because a lot of like the biggest vultures with Puerto Rico were the so-called principled never Trump Republicans who, believe the Republican Party is about brutal austerity, systematic racism, endless war, but not that plus rudeness. And of course, they all fucking bent the knee before January of 2017. Paul Singer especially gave a ton of money to the transition team, the inauguration. And of course, yeah, Trump is going to let him just pick off the flesh of Puerto Rico now.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this gets to your new book. Like I said, No is Not Enough. You talk about these accelerating ecological disasters and are the man-made role that they are sort of disasters of contemporary human civilization that also create these opportunities for a kind of atavistic corporate and political ruling class to do what they've always done, which is transfer more wealth into private hands, gut the private sector, increasingly militarize police and law enforcement and things like that. However, now we get to Trump, which is in himself is like an individual shock doctrine. Like the whole Trump, our politics itself is becoming an accelerating series of catastrophes, which then in turn become an excuse to push through this same agenda. And this becomes kind of a synthesis of a lot of what you've written about before. But I think the thing that we've talked a lot about and remarking upon the Trump administration and his run for presidency is pushing back on this notion that Trump represents some kind of strange aberration and like this is so crazy, like something like this has never happened before, this is so weird and bizarre, when really it's just he is really the culmination of decades of politics in American culture. And I just want to quote now from the book. You write, Trump is not a rupture at all, but rather the culmination, the logical endpoint of a great many dangerous stories our culture has been telling for a very long time. That greed is good, that the market rules, that money is what matters in life, that white men are better than the rest, that the natural world is there for us to pillage, that the vulnerable deserve their fate and the 1% deserve their golden towers, that anything public or commonly held is sinister and not worth protecting, that we are surrounded by danger and should only look after our own. So, do you think the Trump administration is sort of like a natural disaster in that it creates all of these opportunities through its own buffoonishness and absurdity to distract people and and then create an opportunity to push through a hard right-wing agenda? Yeah,
and I think that's why I try throughout the book to interrogate this claim that people are shocked, because I think it's bullshit. I think that it also creates a sort of a posture where people absolve themselves. If you're shocked, this has nothing to do with you, and so no, it's not shocking. It's the most cliched outcome of American politics. Like if 10 years ago you wrote a novel and this happened, your editor would be like, "This is so boring. Get it away from me." Like it's bad sci-fi.
Yeah. Well, I mean, people say it was in The Simpsons, and it was a joke on The Simpsons 15 years ago, from a bad Simpsons episode after the show got crappy. Yeah, it's not a golden age Simpsons joke. It's a late period, exhausted. We got to put some shit out every week, and we don't really care anymore. Simpsons episode joke, and then it became reality.
He is like the garbage president, and this is like garbage sci-fi that we're living in. So I think that's why I think when people claim to be shocked, then that's kind of an excuse to be in this sort of state of paralysis. And so sort of like what I try to do is just like, no, like we know this guy is, we know where he came from, of course, And so, because when you're in that state, then you're not going to be strategic. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't even see him. I mean, what I'm worried about is how these guys would exploit an actual shock, like something that really did come as a bolt from the blue. That's where they get really, really dangerous.
I mean, it's bad enough already, but yeah, you do mention in the book, I mean, this is probably the scariest thought, is if there were another 9/11 or not even 9/11, just like any kind of, big or symbolic terrorist attack in America, what that would look like under a Trump presidency.
Yeah, and they start a war, and that gets the jingoism into high gear, and we already we caught a glimpse of that with Syria, with the missile attack on Syria, when suddenly the whole tone changed. He's presidential, and it would be disastrous.
Oh yeah, you see it with like Kelly and McMaster's. Like it's a great point about like people acting shocked. Kelly and McMaster's entire thing is just to look distraught when Trump is just saying whatever. And then when you actually look at what they believe, it's 98% of what Trump believes, but they also they're more proactive about going to war with Iran. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh, that's what people want. They want this respectable military man and this respectable demeanor and endless war.
Well, one of the things that I actually think is most dangerous about Trump and the way he's metabolized in the culture is this sort of the trust in the generals as the adults in the room, right?
Yeah.
And this idea of like, the generals are coming to restore order on this government, and that's good. Like that's a really that's really close to the generals restore order on all of us. Like if we've already set them up.
America, directed by Costa Gavras.
Yeah, so that's one of the more worrying developments.
I love that after Charlottesville, where people are like, "Oh, but thank you, General McMaster's, for saying racism is bad," it's kind of a weird thing because it's like we have this just fucking bumbling dumbass in there who's just wandering around like talking about like Nancy O'Dell and buying furniture, and we think we'll heal the nation if he was somehow the type of person who would unequivocally condemn Charlottesville. Yet like when McMaster's does it, it's like, oh, thank you for standing against white supremacy, and I respectfully disagree with your position of turning Iran into a glass parking lot, but that's not quite out in the open blood and soil white supremacy, but that's fine. That fits in our purview of acceptable violence.
And I think that your point, Will, about what is it covering up, right? While everybody is focused on the Trump shock or the shock. I mean, I actually think of it as the Schlock Doctrine, not the shock doctrine, because it's not shocking, but it is a great show, and it's hard to take your eyes off it. And so that daily shock, that state of shock of what did he do today? What's going to happen? And that sort of, and just the more than anything else, I think the media addiction to that show, mm-hmm. which they were addicted to during the campaign, they're still addicted to it. I mean, the cover that gives to the Goldman Sachs guys he's put in there, to Scott Pruitt, who's getting so much done, and this narrative, and it's boring, but he's just dismantling, health and safety and environmental regulations. And, we're hearing this story, oh, he's incompetent, he doesn't know what he's doing. And they are getting stuff done, and this is getting almost no coverage because comparatively boring.
And
right?
we were talking about this the other day, and people have also completely forgotten about Ben Carson at Housing and Urban Development, which is presiding over basically the final coup de grace on that, sector of the federal government. It's just being basically put out to pasture. It's just withering away completely.
Oh, and now imagine them in Houston.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah. But no, you also talk we've talked about a few of these other people. Like Trump himself is the figurehead. The Schlock Doctrine is, I think, a good way of thinking about it. But like the people in his cabinet are people who have gotten there by spending years as maestros of carrying out the actual shock doctrine. Like, for instance, Steve Mnuchin or Rex Tillerson. Could you talk a little bit about those two or any other names that come to mind?
Yeah. So part of the reason why I worry about the way these guys would handle an economic crisis, which they're doing their best to generate, not out of some grand conspiracy, but just because, you get rich doing it and you get rich after the fact, right? So Mnuchin, he bought a bank so that he could profit from mass foreclosures in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis. And Tillerson, I think that worries me most in terms of the sort of absence of coverage, right? Like, the story we're told about Tillerson is he's not doing anything. He's shut out of all decisions. I find that totally implausible, right? And I think he's quietly doing Exxon's bidding in there, right? Mm-hmm. And I think we will see some of this actually in the aftermath of Harvey in particular. I mean, they've just put
there's a huge oil infrastructure,
yeah, but the person that has just been put in charge of Houston's recovery, their reconstruction czar, is a former president of Shell Oil. So this is so these are people who have spent their careers creating disasters. I mean, ExxonMobil, where Rex Tillerson worked for 41 years, he's never worked anywhere else. His resume consists of Boy Scouts and Exxon. Okay, literally.
Both known for their extensive deals with the Azerbaijani government.
And Exxon, I mean, we know the most about Exxon. I don't think they're unique in this way, but we know a huge amount about Exxon because of this cache of documents that was unearthed by Inside Climate News and the LA Times and the Columbia School of Journalism, where we now know that Exxon was doing absolutely cutting-edge research into the reality of climate change in the 1970s and the early 80s, where they were doing field research off of their oil tankers. They were taking CO2 samples and they were publishing their results in peer-reviewed journals about how, yes, indeed, humans are warming the planet and we're going to feel the effects in a serious way within 10 years. This is, at the beginning of the 80s. And then this is actually Mobil, and then they merged with Exxon. And then ExxonMobil is taking out, or Mobil at the time is taking out full-page ads in the New York Times in the 90s saying, don't sign the Kyoto Protocol because the science isn't in, it's right out of the tobacco company's playbook. They did the research themselves. They understood the connection exactly. They changed their own business practices. They raised their oil rigs. They adapted to climate change. And then they did everything they could to prevent governments from taking action, and were very successful in that. It's not just that they spread climate change denial. They were a huge force in lobbying against the U.S. taking climate action, and they won, And so now we're stuck with the bill. We're stuck with the consequences. This guy should be in jail, right? And he's the Secretary of State, and his friend from Shell is running the reconstruction post-Harvey.
And when he was being before they confirmed him, I remember there was like a big shuffling around where people thought it might have been Tom Cotton or it might have been Giuliani, just these more noticeably awful ghouls. And when it turned out to be Tillerson, I remember even John Kerry saying something like, well, pretty good guy for the job. He knows how to be diplomatic. And it's like, what the fuck?
He can be a Secretary of State. I mean, he's being in charge of Exxon. You're basically in charge of a state.
Oh yeah,
it's like the equivalent of a
bigger budget than the State Department.
Definitely.
My favorite line of this administration. It may be just because I'm weird, but there was this interview with. After they went to Saudi Arabia for the first trip, right? And, Trump did the sword dance, and he did a bad job.
We're big fans of that.
But Tillerson did the sword dance, and he was really good at it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And they interviewed him. Somebody interviewed, I don't remember who, and said, you seem to really know what you were doing. Did you practice? And he said, let's just say it's not my first sword dance.
It's not my first time at the sword rodeo.
I mean,
I think that'd be a good book title. Don't you think, Anthony? Let's just say it's not my first sword dance.
Tillerson has like a senior yearbook of every piece of shit in that entire region. It's like Barzini, King Abdullah. Just
Stay
like,
cool. Have a great summer.
Rex. I love you, dude.
I want to get back to something you said earlier about, again, pushing back on this idea that the claim that we're all shocked by this, that Trump is so radical and so new and so absurd that it's sort of psychologically destabilizing for people, and it leads to a kind of passivity in the face of it, or at least this idea that if he's a monster, then it's like outside the body politic. It's the other. It's like some parasite that's infected us, which is obviously not the case. However, I think the election was like so many people, ourselves included, I thought Hillary was definitely going to, I thought that after, the pussy grabbing tape, there was no way Trump was going to get in the White House. That was wrong, obviously, but there were so many people who really invested a lot in Hillary, and I think the shock of the election was kind of traumatic to them, and I think it has led to a weird kind of paralysis. And your book is about, how do we actually resist Trump? And like we've talked a lot about the show about the hashtag resistance to Trump, this kind of, I don't know, phony or kind of ridiculous play acting resistance to Trump that I think is fueled by a lot of this kind of like the psychological trauma of being so upset by the election and looking for any, it was Russia did it. It couldn't possibly have been, it was Bernie, it was Russia, et cetera. And I'm just wondering, like, how do you see like the opposition to Trump sort of playing in, or like, it's obviously, has it been effective, or has it like played into everything that has allowed him to be as effective as he is?
I mean, one thing I think that's worth emphasizing, right, is that a lot of people were shocked, but a lot of people weren't shocked, right? So, and those people deserve credit, right? And we're trying to warn us who were shocked, because they were simply more in touch with the veins that Trump was tapping into, whether it was white supremacy, whether it was misogyny, whether it was just, schlock culture. I mean, Matt Taibbi was just like, he gets reality TV, gets wrestling, was just like, he's gonna win. Like and so not everyone was shocked. And I think the people who weren't shocked have been in a better position and have been in many ways doing some of the best organizing, and I think, I have my criticisms of the hashtag resistance, and obviously, by calling the book what I did, I'm trying to underline that it cannot simply be a resistance. We have to imagine the world after we win. We have to imagine the world beyond Trump. It cannot be the world before Trump, because that was the world that produced Trump, and plus it was leading us to, ecological and social apocalypse, and that was already here on so many levels. I mean, where we were at before Trump was multiple overlapping social, economic, and ecological crises, and so the idea that we can afford to simply be defensive in a situation like that is morally reprehensible, let alone politically unstrategic. But I do want to, I think we have to give credit to the people who are using the crisis of Trump, using the crisis of this moment to expand the political space, right? Whether on healthcare. I think Bernie deserves a ton of credit for what he's doing with Medicare for All. He's shifted the political landscape. But you listen to some of these DACA, young people who are, getting arrested and saying to the banks of cameras, I am not satisfied just defending this unacceptable status quo. My parents shouldn't be illegal either. We want all 11 million of us. And so, using the fact that there is this sort of horror about what Trump is doing to go, it was not acceptable. That was not acceptable. We have to do better. So if we do that on healthcare, we do that on, immigration, if we do that on climate policy, and there's been a lot of that, right? At the subnational level, at cities, Pittsburgh going, screw you, you weren't elected by the people of Pittsburgh, after Trump said he was elected by the people of Pittsburgh, not Paris, and said, we're going to get Pittsburgh to 100% renewable energy by 2030. If Obama had done that, we'd be in great shape, right? But he didn't do that. His climate policies were disastrous. They were better than Trump, but they were not enough to fend off climate chaos. And we did say that at the time.
I've seen like a lot of encouraging things, and like it's encouraging to see like the healthcare bill fall apart and shit like that, but it's more stuff like the expanding realm of possibilities, like Krasner winning his DA in Philadelphia. Just this idea that we don't have to have a DA who talks about being tough or smart on crime and sending to people on fucking gas price sentences for things, or like all the actual left city council and state legislative members that have won. I think, the two directions we can go in are just hoping that it's the direction of that famous protest sign. If Hillary had won, we'd be at brunch now. It's going to that where much of the same things are happening, and we're ruled by like a Marco Rubio or someone like that, where the awful everyday violence is still going on, but there's a veneer of HR culture over it, and we can just, fucking yell about headlines at each other or whatever we do.
And we may well get to that point, right? I mean, like, it's possible they'll decide to throw Trump under the bus and we'll end up with Pence. I feel ambivalent about it because, the nuke thing is the one thing, right? Where it's just like, they're all horrible. But there is something about Trump and the nuclear codes that does make me feel like, maybe it's better to have one of those guys.
But I guess to go back to this idea of a kind of learned passivity or failure to resist, coming from not just a failure to actively fight, the evil that's in front of us, but a failure to imagine a world that's different. I think I see what I'm seeing a lot of now in this, I think, quite impressive shift on something like Medicare for All. Forget the Republicans. I'm seeing a lot on like the kind of, sensible, pragmatic Democratic side are going, look, Medicare for All, it's a great idea, but how are you going to pay for it? It's just not realistic. It's this process of self-negotiation where they're like, well, look, there is a lot of obstacles to Medicare for All. There's a lot of powerful interest against it. And they just sort of think that that's a reason not to ask for it. That like something that requires politics or political capital to do is an argument against it rather than a reason for it. Right? So like, I guess like, how do we avoid like, this process of, like I said, negotiating against oneself and being confident enough to believe in, believe in something utopian and not have that be like a knock on it.
But I think that's starting to happen, and I'm not sure if I feel like that argument that you just summarized, when we hear it from politicians, is usually a cover for they don't want to do it because they're getting money from the insurance industry. They don't really understand. They don't understand social capital, but they also just kind of made a choice. But that's what's so interesting about what's happening now with Medicare for All. To get somebody like Cory Booker,
right, yeah.
I suppose one could be worried, okay, are people going to believe, are they going to trust it? But it just marks such a shift because it means that their polling is telling them like how much people want this, right? And so that just means you just have to push for more, It means like anything's possible, and I think the UK is such an exciting example of this, right? That Corbyn's fortune completely changes when they release the manifesto and people read it and get excited about it. And he is not a charismatic politician. The ideas are leading, the policies are leading. He's like this anti-charisma figure, and that's why he's trusted. And that's kind of why I'm not worried about the kind of Cory Booker figure stealing it away, because it feels like, I don't know, like it seems like there's such an intuitive sense. Maybe I'm being overly optimistic here. Particularly among young people, of like they want a trusted messenger. It's not just the message; it's the messenger.
Well, I mean, Matt, like I was thinking about what Matt said, like after Corbyn surprised everyone, which is that he never imagined a future that included Trump winning and what that would mean after. But and that meant like what horrors we would see, how the level of degradation and insanity. But also the barriers that broke for the good things that could happen, for the things we were told before that were impossible in a good way.
Yes.
And I think we're going to continue to be surprised by that. And I'm willing to go out on a limb here and say we're going to have no more problems in the world in a few years. Like, no more. We're done, dude.
So
no more problems.
We're seeing this shift in the national conversation and imagination on healthcare, which is very good. And I'm wondering where you see that same shift coming on climate change, because one would imagine with this unprecedented hurricane season and this massive devastation and the accompanying sort of way that people come together in the aftermath of things like that, and the way that the response by people in areas that have been ravaged by those sort of natural quote unquote disasters sort of defeats it defeats, I think, like the rhetoric of capitalism, because anytime anybody says, well, if somebody charges $500 for a case of water, that's good because it shows supply and demand. Everyone regardless of their sort of being steeped in, American culture, they're repulsed by that. They're like, that's disgusting. Fuck you. You're a parasite. And so it could have, but that's always the logic like that. That's the hidden logic of everything that we're told. Like, that's why you have a bad job. That's why you don't have healthcare. Like, that's the same reasoning. And things like hurricanes and natural disasters sort of lay it bare. So I'm just hoping, I guess this is more of a hope and part of a question, but what do you think that this could be a similar moment for climate change when the national conversation and what is possible shifts or not?
I think it could be, but there has to be like a lot of boldness that I don't think we've seen enough of yet. And part of this has to be like a breaking down of the silos between issues, right? Like for a long time. And, I wrote this when I wrote This Changes Everything. Like I was not a climate change person. I spent my adult life writing about issues that are more of the traditional left, labor and economic injustice. And I came to climate change through Katrina. I was working on a book about disaster capitalism. It was not about natural disasters. It was about war. It was about economic crisis. And then Katrina happened. And just seeing that intersection, that overlay of like, this is what happens when heavy weather meets weak and neglected public sphere, meets, institutionalized racism stir, and then there was this moment of revelation, like, I don't know if you guys remember it, but like there was this sort of a thing that happened when the levees broke, where even right-wing pundits were going like, whoa, this is like there was this, people were saying this is like our Berlin Wall collapsing for neoliberalism. Jonah Goldberg wrote a column going, where's big government when you need them, right? But because the left was so tentative in that moment and didn't have the confidence to just go in there, and there's this sense of like, well, is it really polite, or like, meanwhile, Mike Pence is hosting a meeting at the Heritage Foundation about privatizing the school system and, and creating a tax-free free enterprise zone. But there's still this sense of like, should we be talking about climate change in this moment? Should we be putting forward what our plan is about what it means to build back, fair and repairing not just the damage of the storm, but all the things that led up to it, right? And so I think it can be, but it can't, like, and I say this with all love to my friends in the environmental movement, it can't be left to the environmentalists. Like this is a social justice, economic justice, human rights, all of it, and it has to be a broad-based movement. Like so, like what we're dealing with is the legacy of trying to build in the rubble of neoliberalism, where the institutions that used to provide the glue between issues are no longer playing that role. The trade unions aren't playing that role, and we've got a whole lot of NGOs and we've got a disincentive to work together. And so where's that broad platform gonna come? But what I would say is it is a wake-up moment. People are open to it. They don't want to debate whether or not climate change is happening. They're seeing it. They're living it. And I think that where the push needs to be is at the state level and at the city level. So I think what the problem is people have thought about climate change as being this issue that Washington deals with, and they know that nothing's going to come out of Washington and that it's going in the wrong direction, so they feel hopeless about it. But like New York State can do huge amounts. So this is the moment to just go massive. New York has to get to 100% renewables for electricity by 2030. Right? And California has to do it too. And they have to get off fracking and no more bullshit. And the danger of Trump is everybody looks good by comparison. Everybody can stand up and look like a hero. I mean, I live in Canada, right? So like I know about this. So it's so I think the logic needs to be, no, you don't get away with, like, we're not going to give you a pass because you're better than Trump. We're going to demand so much more of you because of Trump, right? Whether it's de Blasio, whether it's the entire state of California, and none of them are doing enough. But I think that if people could focus, just kind of ignore Trump on climate, write it off. We don't actually get our energy from the federal level. We get it at the state level. We get it at the municipal level. There's tons we can do. And actually, as somebody who's written books attacking capitalism her whole life, I have to say the market is helping because the price of solar is now on par. So it is one thing that is going well in the market. Very little, but it is possible to do. It used to be a heavier lift. You used to need a lot more by way of subsidies and things to make it happen. Now you need some good legislation and it can happen.
Is it because
quickly.
The technology has gotten more efficient and it's easier to...
And it's been massively subsidized by Germany. And we're all benefiting from the fact that Germany poured billions of dollars into green tech, and so did China. And now the price is way down.
And Obama wasted $5 million on Solyndra? I don't think so, Naomi.
The thing that really scares me about at least we're better than Trump thing is the way that a lot of people in this sort of hyper Trump focused resistance are not just passively okay with imperialism, but kind of want to return to a type of very polite and airbrushed imperialism that we had under Obama. And I'm kind of wondering, sort of like what Matt asked, do you think we can get that turning point with it where it's, because I feel like my entire life it's just been something that no one in America gives a shit about. We just don't have a country where people care about what we do overseas, who we kill, why we're doing it, why we have so many fucking ships filling up the ocean they can't stop crashing into each other. But do you think there can be like a similar turning point there?
No.
Okay. All right.
No?
I'm just going to go with no. I'm sorry, Felix.
What if I start a Twitch stream?
Well, it is one of the problems with this country of yours. No, that when the worse things are in the United States, the more insular things can get, right?
Yeah.
And it happened it happened during the Bush years, where the country became more narcissistic and inward looking. I was part of what was wrongly called the anti-globalization movement, and it wasn't perfect, but it was an international movement. It was an internationalist movement, and including most of the parts of it in the U.S. I think there were parts, there were big mistakes made, frankly, within the labor movement in framing it in hyper-nationalist, anti-China, yellow peril terms a lot of the time. But the broader movement was really exciting in its internationalism and building those relationships, and opposing NAFTA and building a really amazing coalition with Mexico and with labor and environmentalists in Mexico and in Canada and the U.S. And we lost a lot of that as soon as Bush was elected, and certainly with the exception of the anti-war movement, right? Like where there was that sort of that burst of the whole world is against this war. And that's really the last time I remember like the U.S. really being part of a global conversation, right? And yeah, I think, and this is why I think we have to put Trump in the context of a people in this country act as if this has never happened anywhere else, and it isn't happening anywhere else, and it has, and it is. I mean, he's not that different from Berlusconi.
Berlusconi, I was going to say, was another like ridiculous TV figure. I mean, yeah.
And his combination of anti-free trade and xenophobia and white
misogyny.
supremacy is Le Pen. It's helpful to see these global trends. So, yeah, I mean, like probably go with no, but it would be nice if it were yes.
No. Felix, check your charts again. By 2022, if you look at the graph, no more problems. No more problems.
I'm going to get Eminem to do his song.
No more drama. This is sort of going in a different direction, but it gets back to this idea that, like, an idea that you developed in No Logo about like how this shift in capitalism into which like corporations no longer really saw themselves as something that like produced something, but they just sort of sat on intellectual property and thought of it. They became brands rather than something like producers of things. And that we see that reflected in politics, certainly with the election of Donald Trump, who is the ultimate personal brand. His brand is being a boss, and being the president is being the best boss of all time. And like, sort of like, that's sort of the genius of him as a politician. But I want to, like, in terms of the opposition to him, and I'm speaking specifically like of the left, we live in a world now where like now everything is a personal brand, and we're certainly a part of that ourselves. Everyone's online, everyone's on social media, everybody is projecting some aspect of themselves in this kind of public way and getting feedback or making money off of it. And in terms of a lot of excitement, and I think a lot of great opportunity that's happened post-Trump on the left, be it the DSA or other socialist groups in America and elsewhere. I guess like what I want to ask is like, do you think there's a danger in the opposition or in political organizing against a phenomenon like Trump and this kind of branded corporate universe of becoming another brand in themselves?
I do. It really worries me, honestly. And I think it's something that needs to be talked about without it being all about pointing fingers and recrimination, because it just like we are in the rubble of neoliberalism and nobody is outside of it. And I think a lot of people you go into these movements because they want to build the broadest possible movement, and they want to win, and they want to change the world. And then they go and they get a job at, an organization which has which has a funding model, which puts them in competition with other people doing similar work, which encourages them to narrow their demands so that they can claim a win and go back to their either to their funders or to the people who gave them money online and say, we won, which is, it's a huge disincentive to political ambition, right? Because, you're probably going to lose if you actually ask for what you want, at least for the first few times. And I just think that the posture of a genuine mass movement is one that approaches the world with open arms and wants as many people as possible and is not possessive about ideas and just wants the ideas to spread as far as possible. And you have a lot of great people working within institutions that have the exact opposite structures, that want to own ideas, that want to compete with others who are doing similar things. And and it's written into the tax code in all kinds of ways that prevent people from cross-pollinating, from like going between electoral politics and movement politics and all of it. And so I just think this stuff, a lot of the way it gets discussed is really accusatory, right? And really just like, you're a sellout, you're an asshole, and everybody has their backs up. And I just think we should just be like, look at it as a system and just be like, there's a reason why we haven't built the broad-based movement that we all know we need, right? And it's structural, and let's try to figure out ways to fix it,
I certainly think, nobody should ever accuse us of being sellouts or being a brand or, just in it for the money or anything like that. That's step one, according to Naomi Klein. You heard it. Naomi Klein, the book is No Is Not Enough, Resisting Trump's Shock Politics and Winning the World We Need. Thanks so much for joining us.
It was really fun. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
The last,
use your one
sure, the last line in this is... in this Business Insider article is, Gorka did not respond to Business Insider's request for comment on whether he'd seen the impression, which is hilarious, which means they asked him.
Yes.
He's probably seen it.
He knows. He's like, oh, I've seen it. I've seen it all right.
Trust Mr. Chapo, I've got eyes everywhere.
Yeah. I have seen it. I will not comment on it until phase 3 commences.
SoundCloud. I'm a SoundCloud rapper. Who's trying to smoke? I have got loud.
As you see, the man who possesses the most loud is the man who holds all the cards in this great game of ours.
You can contact my line or DM me, Mr. Bond.
I'm very pleased to know that there's a paragraph in there that points out that a couple other people try to do Gorka, like John Lovett does Gorka, and Chris Hayes tries to do Gorka, and he says that
garbage, dog shit. That's dog shit. No, yeah, all right. We are back. That was Naomi Klein, and I would like to point out that as she was leaving, Naomi did want us to give a shout out to wrestler Daniel Bryan, who's a big fan of her work that she found out this week. So hopefully Daniel Bryan will listen to Chapo. He will listen to Naomi Klein on Chapo. Daniel Bryan, come on Chapo. Tim Faust, Brett and Brian, they would go insane for that.
Yeah, they would. They'd probably get pissed at us, frankly, if we got them before they did.
Naomi also, she said she wanted to shout out her friend, too.
What was her friend's name?
Yeah, but we forgot what she said, so it's no good.
Pointless.
Fuck.
It's a great shout out.
Hey, her friend. Yeah, hey, Naomi's friend. Well, way to go.
Well, it's good because it could be any one of her friends. Basically, all of her friends are
She's
being
a fan.
shouted out.
Her friend.
If you're friends with Naomi,
Hey, friend.
hell
hey,
yeah,
friend.
dude.
How you doing?
Yeah.
Okay, so to round out the episode this week, I have a reading series for you guys that is it's contemporary, it's fresh, it's new. It's Peggy Noonan, everybody.
Her first appearance on the show.
Yeah, I can't believe it. This is the first time we've ever done Peggy Noonan. And can we, God, I wish we could still do music drops, but like the Peggy Noonan theme song is.
What is it?
I hate being sober.
I'm a smoker.
I hate being sober. Or also, Chief Keef, fuck rehab.
Fuck rehab.
Fuck rehab, and I hate being sober.
Or Lil White. Oxycontin, Xanax bars. Percocet, Loratab.
Play drinking makers. Marca, cranberry vodka. Peggy Noonan stays fucked up. Percocet, Xanax, Ativan, Peggy. This is Peggy Noonan writing her column. In Peggy Noonan, current and recent MSNBC contributor
And Pulitzer Prize winner.
Pulitzer Prize winner, Peggy
2017.
Noonan. Which I like, you know.
Her Pulitzer Prize is very similar to Henry Kissinger's Nobel Peace Prize. It's just a crime.
This is a great one. The headline says it all. This is like this headline sums up Peggy Noonan's entire career. The headline of this op-ed piece in the Wall Street Journal by Peggy Noonan is "Under anesthesia, everything was beautiful."
Fucking A.
The subhead is, "My American dream made me feel proud. Like there's hope for our political class." I'm just imagining Dennis Hopper in Blue Velvet. America's beautiful, mommy.
Daddy wants to vote.
Daddy wants to vote.
All right.
Or
So,
it's like the end of Brazil. She's strapped to the table and they're drilling a hole in her head.
Yeah.
all right.
Ronnie.
All right. The first paragraph. You've got the touch. You've got the power.
Okay, so this is Peggy Noonan. Here we go. Here she goes.
Naomi Noonan. Get it?
Here she goes. I saw this. The exhausted woman on the shelter cot was surrounded by stressed children when Melania came over, bent down, and asked, "How are you doing?" Is that a good Melania? That's
perfect.
Okay. How are you doing? The woman said, "Well, hurricane."
What the
hurricane.
Hurricane.
This is like this is like in the room when Lisa's mom is like, and my cancer's back.
Well, hurricane. She realized who she was talking to and got flustered. "Those are nice shoes," she said. They were flat ankle boots, the kind you wear on the street or the park.
Guest reporting by Chris Saliza.
Only of the finest leather.
The finest leather. No, bubbles.
Oh, the finest leather. There's a leather in France. Okay, thank you, said Melania. She saw the woman's soggy sneakers. "What size do you wear?" she asked. "Oh, 9, said the woman. "They got bigger with the kids."
What?
Your feet get bigger when you're pregnant.
get bigger.
That's not a thing.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it
All right,
is.
fine. Delete that. Then. My feet are the same size.
Well, you've never been pregnant, Matt.
Says you.
Empreg Grisman. Shout out to my friend Callie, who wants to will Chapo Empreg art into the world.
This is not insane. What is actually? This just reminded me. Peggy. This is a digression.
It's Peggy Hill.
This is a Peggy Noonan digression. This is another quote from Peggy Noonan about the first time she saw Ronald Reagan, and it goes like this: "I first saw President Reagan as a foot." Highly polished brown Cordovan wagging merrily on a hassock. I spied it through the door. It was a beautiful foot, sleek,
What?
such casual elegance
What?
and clean lines, but not a big foot, not formidable,
What?
maybe a little frail. I imagined cradling it in my arms,
What?
protecting it from unsmooth roads.
What?
This is a real quote from Peggy Noonan.
What the? Yeah. Wow.
God.
I am speechless.
Okay, let's go on. So this is back to Peggy's fantasy. Melania took off her boots
protector.
and put them on the
Ooh,
woman's
yeah.
feet.
Okay, say it slower.
Melania took off her boots
Oh.
and put them on the woman's
Yes.
feet. She did this in a way that was turned away from the press so they wouldn't see. The woman's daughter said, "Mommy, they're nice." Melania took from her bag a pair of white sneakers, put them on, and said, "Oh, good. These are so comfortable." They talked some more, and Melania left. And the mother looked to her kids and said softly, "These are the first lady's shoes." Donald was with an old. Donald was with.
All right, so just a second. I'm assuming that that whole thing is because she saw the picture of her in the stilettos and got
Yeah.
mad.
Yeah,
like
probably.
every moron.
Yeah. We must protect
Well,
Melania.
this is the most Protestant thing. It's not even like faith over
She's
actions
not, dude.
anymore.
She's
It's just
Catholic as hell.
Things I imagine you doing.
She's Catholic as hell, though.
The American Catholics are Protestants. Dude. I don't fucking give a shit, dude.
That's kind of true, actually.
Yeah.
It is true. I'm right. Again,
Yeah, no, it's true. They got absorbed into the Borg when they came over here. Their
That's
fucking
right.
potato boats.
Scots Irish psychos. Read Born Fightin' by Jim Webb.
Back to the fantasy. Oops, there goes gravity. Okay, Donald was with an old woman in a wheelchair. She was spunky and funny, and he loved her. She gestured toward his head and said, "It looks nice today."
What?
He said, "I'm having a good hair day." "Why do you do that?" she asked. "Well, it's a habit," he said. "When I was young, I had this thick brown hair that went down my brow like a swoop, and I looked like a Kennedy, and it was beautiful. Then it started to get thin and gray, and it made me feel old, and old is weak." "Not for me, honey," she said. "Does it take a long time to do?" "About 20 minutes. After the shower, I comb, blow dry, tease it a little, finish the blow dry, then a lot of spray." "Why don't you not do that?" "It's kind of my brand." You got a new brand, she said. You're president. Be normal. He paused and said, I was actually thinking of that.
All right, so we now can confirm that she's criticizing them for what they didn't do.
Yeah. This is her dream of what
So
America...
she was mad about the pumps. I was right.
Oh, okay. Matt is exonerated. No, this is... Yeah, Peggy's beautiful dream continues. She told him that she used to be a hairdresser. She said she'll come to the White House and cut his hair. He turned, gestured, and an aide ran over. My beautiful friend here is coming to see me next week with scissors.
Eliminate her immediately.
Arrange it.
Headshot. Headshot.
Keith Schiller pulled out his Ruger MK2.
No, the aide then took out the one of the several hypodermics of Thorazine that he keeps with him at all times.
This woman is threatening my life. She wants to cut Baron's hair too.
He kissed the old woman on the forehead. She gave a wave. Goodbye, big boy.
He does look like a big boy statue.
The press was surrounding the FEMA guy and the update. Wait, the press was surrounding the FEMA guy with the update and missed it. So like Peggy is also criticizing the press for not being concerned with these beautiful human moments that are happening in her fantasy.
her mind.
Yeah.
By the way, if Trump did let some old lady cut his hair, he would be impeached the next day. If he showed up in public with whatever disgusting tendrils are actually underneath that fucking sherbet monstrosity.
His bald.
Well, yeah, but there's also like strands and little like pube things hanging that he clutches the hair extensions to. If he came in, it's like if he didn't wear the orange makeup. If he came out with that pallid, gross, 5-week-old meat face with this tendril pubes hanging off of his bald chrome dome, he would be instantly impeached by unanimous vote in both houses.
But what if he got cornrows and got impeached for appropriation? What if he got dreadlock? What if him, Barron, Melania?
Peggy's dream continues. This happened just before the Mnuchin story got cleared up. The Treasury Secretary had not asked for a government plane to take him on his honeymoon. His request got all bollocksed up in transmission, but there was a paper trail. It turned out he was waiting at the airport with his new wife when he saw a guy in army fatigues comforting a young woman in a white and yellow dress. She was crying. Mr. Mnuchin sent over an aide to find out what was wrong.
He didn't have a DVD copy of Suicide Squad yet. Steve Mnuchin said, I always keep 10 of them on me at all times. My wife is going to yell at you now.
The guy in fatigues had literally just flown in from Kabul. He and the woman...
Fuck off! Fuck you!
He and the woman had just married in a chapel down the street. They'd been bumped from their honeymoon flight to Bermuda. Mr. Mnuchin said... Give them my plane. Louise were flying commercial. They booked seats on the next flight to France and went to duty free where they bought the best champagne and placed it in her Hermes bag. They wrote a note. Every soldier on leave deserves a honeymoon. Every bride deserves champagne.
And they all deserve mortgages at my company. This is insane. This is like Nick talked about it earlier this week with the Brooks and Dunn song God's Busy. It's just all these weird vignettes and Brooks and Dunn go, well, God's busy. God must be busy. It's just like, I don't know. Does she just have like an anesthesia drip now?
No.
I think Matt is right. I think she is being critical of the Trump administration.
But she's being critical in exactly the stupidest way.
I know.
The most surface level things about affect and polish and style.
Optics.
But even that, it's like
she's under the influence of the dental drugs, okay? You can't. This is dream logic. This is a Gilliam film.
But someone edited this. Someone like read this and was like, "This
I don't
is
think
good."
that these people
I don't think Peggy Noonan gets edited
at that level.
Yeah.
Like her
You're
and
right.
Friedman,
Her and David Brooks certainly doesn't get edited.
They do not get edited.
I'm sure she gets slightly edited, but as far as the concept this springs from, she hands this in last minute. They can't do a whole lot by the time they've got it. They're like, well, I guess we're running the Dennis Hopper column.
The shit that she wrote on the smock that she had at the dentist's office and just handed it to some poor copy editor.
So she goes, every soldier on leave deserves a honeymoon. Every bride deserves champagne. The couple discovered the bag on the plush leather seat just as the pilot was saying, please be seated and buckle up. We've got special clearance. So now she goes on from Donald Trump and she goes, Also at this time, Hillary Clinton's book came out, and it was transcendent. A book of historical heft, of depth. She was modest, no humble, and she loves America like you wouldn't believe. I know what you expect, a blame-shifting revenge fest, she wrote. But that would be a book of what I've come to see as political littleism. A book that reduces everything to personalities and polls, operatives and excuses. Smallness is killing us. I have been a major political figure in the late 20th and early 21st century in America. My elective career is over. Here, I tell you what I know about the age we're in, its most crucial challenges, what gets in the way of our meeting them, and how we can get around what gets in the way. She was unsparing. She said that after 30 years at the top of American life, she knew the biggest, most dangerous shift in our political reality came when the American people began to detach from those at the top, from the simple reason they'd come to understand the top had detached from them. She covered the landscape: wars, political money grubbing, bad faith, immigration, globalism. Those at the top, she wrote, proceeded as if they were unconcerned with what was being asked of the middle and the bottom.
Unlike Ronald Reagan.
My candidacy got caught in the crossfire, understandably because I had long been at the top and many saw me as oblivious. Cynics expected she would blame her 2016 loss on the fact that she is a woman. America is a sexist, misogynistic, in its dumb way. Cannot imagine a woman as president. To be candid, she wrote, I had that in my first draft. Sheer honesty left her reckoning with Angela Merkel of Germany, democratically elected and seen since the Obama era as the true leader of the West. I had to wrestle, too, with the groundbreaking leadership of Golda Meir and Margaret Thatcher, of Indira Gandhi and Cory Aquino. America is not more backward than their nations. The engine of its heart is not driven by ugly isms.
This is
Sorry, she just goes on like
this is
that.
actually worse. I never thought I'd say this, but this is worse than what Hillary did write.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
it's
yes,
garbage.
yes.
And of course, oh, it's weird how people feel like the people at the top have disconnected from the people at the bottom. And of course, it's some bullshit like, well, they're too busy drinking lattes and having exotic beers, as opposed to the fact that the average CEO makes something like 500 times what he did 30 years
What
ago.
actually happened was the actual policies of the Ronald Reagan
Yes.
administration, which
Fucking dolt.
which completely detached the rich people.
But
Margaret Thatcher,
they just created this insane cut-off bubble of ultra wealth. But the thing that makes it happen is not some cultural bullshit. It's the fact that they have all the money.
And I love the juxtaposition. You know, elites, we got to reconnect with people. Hold on, I need to drink 3 jugs of Thorazine and talk about if Melania did some weird shoe play with some fucking lady.
Yeah, no, Steve Mnuchin, the fucking foreclosure king, one of the most grotesque predatory assholes in existence.
Cattle gun immediately.
Is gonna reconnect with the struggling middle class by giving 2 people a ride on his personal fucking jet.
How about all the people he fucking evicted? What do they get?
Okay, so Peggy continues. Yes, she noted, women in national life, especially in this technologically and culturally brutalist age, have it harder. What is that phrase even?
That's
technologically and culturally brutalist?
Brutalist has a meaning. It's gibberish.
Okay.
It just sounds
Okay,
bad.
yeah.
This is like when AJ read philosophy.
Yes, it's exactly like that.
Only a fool would say otherwise. But she wondered if there wasn't something deeper. Part of the challenge is that voters expect not less from women, but more. They have higher expectations because deep down, they think more of women. It's a compliment, though a difficult one. Golda is the toughest. Indira the most ruthless. Thatcher the most unwavering.
okay.
They elect a woman when
Those
they
all mean
can-
the same thing.
Benazir, this explodes
the most
easiest.
combustible. they elect a woman.
That's really bad.
They elect a
You
woman.
can cut that, I understand.
No, keep it. They elect a woman when they can tell she's better than the guys. And not enough saw me as better than the guys. They saw me as one of the guys.
Is this still Hillary? Or
Yeah, this is still Hillary.
They saw me as the star of the 80s classic comedy, Just One of the Guys.
I may not be at a pizza place, but there are a guy and a girl and me. Hillary's also on anesthesia.
That would explain the 2006 campaign. She was on anesthesia.
She goes, she didn't blame sexism for her loss, she said, because she didn't want to demoralize girls or discourage women. And she didn't want to scapegoat boys and men. They have no cultural champion now. No one's officially on their side. They're culturally out of style.
Floyd Mayweather.
but they,
Floyd Mayweather, Max Hardcore, James Dean, Chris Kyle, Dennis Rader, Mr. Softy,
Papa John.
Papa John.
on the book tour, she let everyone into her appearances free. America saw her anew. People listened. She was redeemed and appreciated. It made me feel proud, like there's hope for our political class. This is what I saw this week. I should note, this part is true, that I saw much of it while anesthetized for a major surgical procedure. What was the surgical procedure? A fucking lobotomy? For an hour afterward, even knowing it was either a fantasy or a dream, I felt so hopeful, cheerful, proud. I give it to you.
Sincerely, Alma Garrett.
It's Blitz.
One pill makes you smaller, the other makes you school charter.
I don't think there's a whole lot left to say.
Yeah.
That's astounding.
Yeah.
How
So
are we not
Peggy
talking
said
about
it all.
Peggy more?
Bad.
Holy shit.
Peggy said it all, baby.
We need to talk about Peggy more often.
Molly. Peggy. Cassette. Molly. Peggy.
Mask
Peggy.
on, fuck it, mask off.
I really do think that we
Okay.
have enough.
Okay, yeah.
All right. So that's it for this week, everybody. Remember, Chapo posters, Chapo Podfest. Till next time, guys.
Hasta pronto.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye. 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 Bye.